Good evening, everyone. It is Bridget here from Bridget's Kitchen on day number 7 of our 12 cooking days of Christmas. Today's class is quite spectacular only because I love what we're doing, but more than that, it's one of these classes that might give you a bit of an idea on not just how to make it for Christmas, but I'll be teaching you guys how to make my gluten-free sweet pastry. So even if you want to make a sweet pie and you want to do it gluten-free, this is the class for you. So what we're doing today is we're doing fruit mince pies, which in itself is a bit of a weird conundrum if you think about it, because mince, especially if you're coming from Australia and New Zealand, for us mince tends to be ground meat. But what do you mean we're making fruit mince pies? So at Christmas time, I'm going back, centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the actual pies used to be full of meat, hence why we have this mince meat name to our pies. Somewhere along the way, someone got a clue and said, hey, let's change it to some fruit instead of mince. So your traditional kind of lamb mince, which used to be the pies that were made, and that, yes, the lamb mince pies used to have cloves, they used to have nutmeg in them. This is a mince, right? And then it's somewhere along the line, someone said, hey, I'm not so sure about that. Let's try something different. And so the fruit mince pie was born. So we're doing a fruit mince pie today, and we are using those wonderful flavors of Christmas. We're using that wonderful gluten-free pastry as well. And hello to everyone who's joining me. Marcella, good to see you. Thomas, good to see you as well as the lovely Barb. Thank you guys for joining today. This class, as I was saying, for me has a very, I have a bit of a soft spot for mince pies. Not just the savory versions, which I grew up with in New Zealand, because you guys know, if you're from NZ, you know that we love our mince pies, especially for me, mince and cheese was my favorite. I'm not doing mince and cheese, but I am doing fruit mince, and it is the perfect little treat for Christmas, because it comes in a very small little package. As you know, it usually is handheld. There's enough little bit of fruit in there, and there's enough crunch from that wonderful pastry to send you into Christmas heaven. So let's get into the recipe today. And this recipe, by the way, if you are joining in or if you'd like to follow the recipe at home, you can go and download my Christmas ebook, which is bridgetshealthychristmas.com, and you can get 50 festive recipes. This recipe is a part of those. So let's get into that. It is, like I said, I'm so excited because I love fruit mince so incredibly much, and I love these little tarts. And once again, it wouldn't be Christmas without those wonderful little tart shells. So the first thing we're going to do is actually going to get into the mince. So we're going to do the fruit. I should stop calling it mince, right? Because instantly I go mince, mince beef, mince chicken, mince lamb. No, this is fruit mince. And we're actually not doing any mincing. And hello to Helen joining me from Brisbane, and the lovely Pamela as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Pamela. Let's get into the mince part, the fruit part first. So come on, join me down. Come on down. Come down here. Come here. All right. Today's apron is actually a little bit industrial, as you can see. It's a little bit industrial. I'm feeling quite industrial. I put on this green t-shirt. It actually says Aloha Hawaii underneath it. And I put on this green t-shirt today and thought to myself, I feel a little bit industrial, like I'm going to work. So I've got my industrial apron on today, which is all very wonderful. But let's, as I was saying, get into the mince. I've got lots more vintage aprons to show you guys too, by the way. Heaps more. But let's get into the fruit. So you can see what I have here already, and believe it or not, I like to put a little bit of apple into my fruit mince. I'm going to continue to call it mince today because it feels like the right thing to do. So taking up my peeler, and if you're wondering about stocking stuffers, like seriously, this is the most fabulous peeler you could ever buy. In the industry we call this a Rex peeler, and I think it's just a brand, or a speed peeler. And you get the most wonderful strips, and it's so fast to use. So you'll find chefs all over the world use this style of peeler to peel our vegetables. And obviously, oh, caught it. Look at that. Wow, it bounced off the bench. I caught it anyway. There you go. So we use that type of peeler. Can't believe I caught it. That's because I've got the industrial apron on. That's why I caught it, 100%. So yeah, that's the sort of peeler that we love to use. So if you're thinking of a stocking stuffer, that peeler is amazing. So with my apple, I've just obviously peeled it with that wonderful peeler. And then all I want to do is just cut it into very small dice. So obviously getting rid of the core, we don't need that in our fruit mince. And then just taking our apple through and cutting it into a nice small dice. You don't want to have big chunks here, because the apple, even though it's going to cook in the fruit, in my little pot there, it's still going to hold its shape. And don't forget that these, this apple and this fruit is going into little mince pies. So we can't have it too big. So, you know, take your time with this step. Take your time, don't rush it. Cut it slowly and make sure you've got that really wonderful small dice there. Right, so that can go into our pot, like that. The next thing that we need to add into there is obviously the fruit, because we're going to be making fruit mince. So we're going to add the fruit. And the fruit that I have today is just a mixture of sultanas and raisins and currants. There's a little bit of mixed peel in there if you like that sort of thing. You decide what type of fruit selection that you want to use. You can buy a pre-mixed fruit selection if you really want to, but or you could make up your own accordingly. Completely up to you. So I'm going to grab my scales. Here they are. Here are my lovely scales, and then I'm going to weigh off the fruit straight into the pot. Pot hasn't been on, so it's okay to weigh it off. So that's going to go in. A couple 100 grams of the fruit goes in there, just like that. While I'm in the weighing mode, I'm also going to weigh off some fiber syrup. Remember, fiber syrup is a prebiotic, so it's really good for our gut health, but it is also a lovely alternative to honey, maple, agave. That's good for your gut health. So I'm going to put in my fiber syrup there. You could use gold fiber syrup, you could use clear fiber syrup. I think in the recipe I actually call for gold. You don't have to do gold if you don't have it, that's absolutely fine. I'm also going to weigh off just some water into there as well. So you want some water. Everything goes straight into the pot. It's really easy to do. So I'm going to add some water. About a cup of water goes in there as well. Like I said, if you want the recipe, just go straight to your ebook that you've already downloaded, or to get all the ingredients of what I'm doing here. But also, if you want to play along at home, it's a really good idea to get printed off, and then we can take some notes as we're going along as well. That definitely helps. So I've gone for my orange here, and what I want to do is I want to zest that orange, because obviously there's a lot of flavor in the zest. And the first thing we do is we zest it, and then we're going to juice it. And you want a nice, decent size orange. I've only got this size, which should be fine. But we're after about a medium size orange. And the zest is going to be really important to the overall flavor of what we're making here. The zest is super important. So if you think it's not, please trust me. It is super important in the overall effect. Because we want a little bit, and I'm not going to say that this is bitter, but it definitely has a quality to it that is not sweet. So that's why the zest is really important. So that goes in there, as well as the zest. I'll just leave it in there. As well as the zest, I'm also going to add the oranges. So when it comes, the juice. So when it comes to zesting and juicing, always start zesting first before you juice, because it's really hard to zest an orange that's already been pulverized like I'm doing right here. Because if you think about it, that's really hard to zest. So definitely, in terms of timing and which one to do first, go with the zest, and then you juice the orange. All of that goes straight in there. We can't forget, because we are making this fruit mince, we need to add some spices as well. Spices are massively important. So I'm going to be adding about half a teaspoon, which is about that much, of cinnamon. About that much. You don't have to be precise. It's just kind of a roundabout. Half a teaspoon of cinnamon goes in there, as well as, and this is just mixed spice, so it's that combination of spices. I'm going to be putting 2 teaspoons of mixed spice goes in there as well. So the next thing we need to think about, including all the things that we've got in here as well, is just turning it into a massively prebiotic mixture, and I do that with a little bit of inulin. So when it comes to inulin, I'm going to be adding the inulin straight into here. Here it goes. And it's not only going to sweeten the mixture, but it's also, as I was saying, it's going to increase the dietary fiber, which is really important, but it's also going to create this into a prebiotic mixture, which means that it's going to be really good for our gut health. So that is what it looks like. Once your fruit mince looks like that, we've got the raw apple, you've got the other fruit in there. Once it looks like that, it just goes onto the cooktop, and we're going to bring it to the boil as well. So here we go, we're going to bring that to the boil, and then we're going to simmer it normally for about 30 minutes, because we want it to get lovely and syrupy, which is also really, really important. So while that is doing its thing over there, I can just forget about that for a while. And while that is doing its thing, we can start to focus on the pastry. Remember I was saying with the pastry, is it's one of these recipes that you can, of course you can use it to make these fruit mince pies, but it is so versatile. You can use it for any sweet pastry that you need to make for any type of pie, whether it be a cherry pie or an apple pie or whatever. This pastry is very, very versatile. So taking up my bowl, the first thing I want to do with that, go back to my scales. Let's just kind of kick on with that pastry and get it all ready. I'm going to be adding in, I've just got a plain gluten-free flour here. I'm going to be adding in the flour, followed by buckwheat flour. So buckwheat flour is a little bit nutty, and despite the fact that it's called buckwheat, it is wheat-free. It's actually a seed, so it's not a grain, it's not a grass. It is a seed, so you can quite happily add this in if you are gluten-free, because even though you look at it and go, oh, that's got wheat, I can't have that, that's got gluten. No, it's not. So you don't have to worry. So we're going to be adding in the same amount, equal quantities of plain gluten-free flour and equal quantities of our buckwheat goes into there. So just remember that when you see buckwheat, it is one of those unfortunately named products. There is no wheat in there whatsoever. It is 100% wheat-free, so you don't have to worry. So that goes in there. Give it a little bit of a stir. A little bit of a raising agent goes in next, and that's just in the way of baking powder. So just half a teaspoon, which is about that much, of baking powder goes in. Along with that, we are also going to add in, just for sweetness, because remember this is a sweet pastry, back to my big jar of inulin, and we're going to be adding in, where are we? 3 tablespoons of inulin goes in there. Nice heaped tablespoons of inulin. So once again, we are creating a prebiotic pastry that's good for our gut health, and we've just increased the dietary fiber. Hence why I love inulin so incredibly much. There's all these wonderful things that we're doing right now. It just makes it so awesome. So give that a bit of a stir. This pastry is so easy to do, and because we've taken out the gluten, we can literally do everything straight into the bowl. So now that I've got all my dry ingredients in there, I can start thinking about adding my wet ingredients, and the wet ingredients is incredibly easy. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some water. A couple tablespoons of water goes in. I've made just a bit of a well in the middle, so you can just directly add the liquid in there, just like that. As well as that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla, goes in there too. Just a teaspoon, about that much of vanilla goes in there. Now this particular recipe, as what you've seen so far, is 100% vegan, and you can continue that by adding coconut oil. So I'm going to be adding 3 tablespoons of coconut oil into there. If you wanted to though, there is nothing stopping you from using butter right now when I was using oil. But if you want to keep it vegan, then you add coconut oil, which is really nice, and the effect is still very, very similar, whether it's butter or whether it's coconut oil. So the coconut oil is in there, the water is in there. I'm going to think about adding a little bit of milk, and the milk I'm doing, of course, because I'm keeping it kind of vegan, I'm using an unsweetened almond milk. And I'm going to be adding 3 tablespoons of that. You don't have to use unsweetened almond milk. You could use hemp milk, you could use macadamia nut milk, you could use coconut milk. Any of those types of milks. Because I'm lactose free, I'm keeping the normal cow's milk out of there. But once again, that is completely up to you. So now I've got all my liquid ingredients there, I've got all my dry ingredients there. It just literally requires a spoon, and that's it, and give it a bit of a stir. And what you're looking to do here is to bring the ingredients together so it creates a dough, or a pastry, I suppose is what we're looking for. And you might actually find that it's a little bit crumbly, and that's okay, because one of the things that we need to be really aware about is that every flour that I use has a different absorbency. So what might work for me first time and bring it together to form a pastry, you might find that you need to add a little bit more water, but do it very gently. So do it slowly, just, you know, a tablespoon at a time. until your pastry comes together and it starts, you can see already, can you see it's now beginning to form a dough, whereas before it was super crumbly. That was only 2 tablespoons, I reckon. And just by adding those 2 tablespoons of water, we've actually formed a dough. Look, it's all coming off the edge of the bowl, which is perfect. And I'm literally able to do that. Then you know your dough is formed. So just work with it. Just remember, every flour has a different absorbency rate. Some require more liquid, some require less. So if you find that you make your dough using the ingredients in the ebook and your dough's quite wet, just very slowly begin to incorporate flour. And as you're incorporating the flour, and literally it's just a pinch at a time until your dough comes together. And there's nothing wrong with your measuring skills. All it will be is that the absorbency of your pastry, of your flour, sorry, is different to one that I've used. And that's what you're looking for. That is the consistency. You're able to do that in your hand, and that forms this lovely base for your pastry. So once it's at this stage, all you want to do is cover it in cling film and then just leave it to rest. And in this type of weather, it's pretty hot in Sydney today, you might even leave that to rest in the fridge for about half an hour. If where you are is not that hot, then you could just let it rest, covered in a little bit of cling film on the bench. Half an hour to 1 hour, we just want that to rest. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to roll out when it's done. So that's our pastry done. Easy, right? This pastry, by the way, if you were to wrap it in cling film and leave it in the fridge, because there's nothing in there that can go off, there's no egg, there's no butter, there's no nothing, that will last you for at least a week in the fridge if you want to make it in advance of when you decide to bake your pies or your tarts. So that pastry is solid and it feels really good too. Like seriously, you should be able to do that with it. You should be able to move it from hand to hand without it sticking. Then you know you've got it at a really, really good consistency. And flatten it a little bit before you cling film it, and then that goes in the fridge. That's easy, right? Boom, let's put it there. Move on to the next stage. So once you've allowed it to rest, whether it be for half an hour on the bench, whether it be for an hour or whatever it is, or overnight, doesn't really matter, as long as you give it a bit of a rest. What we do need to do now is think about rolling it out. So I've just made some space on my bench, as you can see. I'm going to go back to my my gluten-free flour and just create a little bit of a resistant surface with a sprinkle, a light sprinkle. You kind of want to shove it that way. A very, very light sprinkle of flour goes on. And this is some dough that I made earlier, and I've had it resting now for a couple of hours. It feels really pliable, it feels really good. Let's see if it has the same type of consistency when I pass it from finger to finger. Oh, it's a bit stickier actually. It's a little bit stickier. That's alright, but you can see I can quite easily pass it from hand to hand without too much of it sticking. It is slightly stickier than that one, so I am just going to work it on the bench a little bit, because what you want is you want it to be really free-flowing. You don't want it to stick. So when you do that, this is a really, not only is this fun, this is a really important step, because this just lets you know that the dough is at a really good consistency. So a little bit more of my gluten-free flour. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit more of that on. Give it a bit of a roll. Now it's feeling really good. And when it comes to baking and when it comes to cooking in general, there's a real, I suppose you have to be an active participant in it. You know, when I'm doing this, I'm not doing this kind of haphazardly. I'm fully present and I'm feeling the dough and I'm feeling what it's doing. Is it sticking to my hands? If it is, I'm going to add just a little bit more flour because I don't want it to stick to my hands. Or if it's too crumbly, I'm going to add a bit more liquid because I want it to be really workable and pliable, which makes the next step really, really easy. So pastry can be a bit of a minefield, and I just suggest that when you are working with pastry, whether it be gluten pastry or gluten-free like this one, you just be quite present and you be quite aware and open to what the pastry is telling you. And right now the pastry is telling me that it feels pretty good. It's a little bit soft and pliable. It's not too sticky. So this is a really, really good time for us to think about rolling it out. So ideally, when you're ready to roll it out, you don't want to work with the whole thing at the same time. I always like to work with half at a time. It just makes it a little bit more easy to do. So I'm going to start with that one. I'm going to grab my rolling pin. Grab my little rolling pin, which is here. Bit of flour goes down because we don't want it to stick to the bench, but at the same time you don't want to add too much flour. Oh, she's really sticky. Bridge, I think this is the weather as well. Sydney is so hot today. Sydney is extremely hot today, and you will find that depending on the weather, wherever you are, if it's cold, you might find it really hard to roll it out. If it's really hot, like it is in Sydney today, you might find it equally hard to roll out. So keep on playing with it, you know, just keep on feeling it through. All right, we'll see what happens now. Let's try that again, shall we? Oh yeah, it's feeling a bit better. I'm able to pick it up, which is really important. If you can pick it up off your bench, you know that it's at a really, really good consistency. Yep, now that's feeling good. It's feeling very, very good. And you're able to do that? Not yet. Oh, she's still very soft. I'm going to add a bit more flour. And it's good for you guys to see this because you can see how even I'm working it and just wanting to make sure that it's correct for rolling out. And as I was saying, pastry can be a bit of a minefield. And it's one that you need to spend a bit of time with. And the major consideration when it comes to pastry is you're able to pick it up. You're able to roll it out without it sticking to your rolling pin. You're able to flip it as well. And so you just keep on adding enough flour to you have that capability, I suppose is the best way to say. It's the capability that you're after. And eventually what you'll find is that the dough becomes very, very workable, which is what I'm happy with now. So I know it's hard to see down here what I've actually got, but I know because it's the same color as the bench, but I have my dough there now. It's feeling very workable. It's quite thin, as you can see. There's not much to it when I pick it up. It's very, very thin, which is perfect. So now I'm going to take my little cutter here and just break out the shapes that I want to make in the pie. So what I have is just a normal 12 hole muffin tin. So, sorry, this is actually a cupcake, it's not even a muffin tin. This is a cupcake tin. I'll give that a bit of a spin to show you guys what's happening in there. Looking pretty good. It's a 12 hole cupcake tin. So with our 12 hole cupcake tin, I'm just going to, you guys can see that? Yes, you can. Wonderful. I'm going to brush it very lightly with just a little bit of coconut oil, keeping this all dairy-free and vegan. And that is just going to help, and it literally is that light. You don't need any more than that, just a little bit right up the sides. Make sure you go up the sides. A little bit goes a long way when it comes to the coconut oil. I probably haven't even put in a teaspoon to do those 6 there. So a little bit of coconut oil goes in there just to help it to come off. And then back to our little pastry cases. And you can see just I'm peeling back the pastry now. Using my little scraper. I'm going to pick up my lovely circle, just like that. And then that goes into the cupcake tin. And then very gently, just, I'm not applying too much pressure, I'm just very, very gently pushing it down to get our lovely tart or pie, mini little pie done there. So this for me, this little instrument here is invaluable. I call it a bulldozer, but it is literally invaluable for when you're working with pastry, because it's your ability to be able to pick it up off the bench quite nicely, because it's got a really sharp edge. This is Bridget's bulldozer. It's got a really sharp edge, so it makes it extremely easy to pick it up off the bench, which is massively important, because you've just created this lovely round, right? You just created this wonderful round. You don't want to ruin it. You don't want to ruin it, and the best way to not ruin it is to make sure, there you go, that you're picking it off the bench with something really, really sharp. And I know there's a lot of techniques that are involved when it comes to this sort of thing. There are, you know, and I'm really, really mindful of the fact that there are a lot of techniques here. But once you master it, you will become an expert so quickly at making this type of pastry. And all you would need to do is just feel it and go, oh no, it needs a bit more flour, or oh no, it needs a bit more water, it's too crumbly. Once you've mastered the feel of pastry, there's so many wonderful things that you can do with it. Like what we're doing here is just one of the wonderful things that you can do with it. But there are so many other wonderful things that you can do with this pastry. And I'm just thinking, like, apple pies, or the base of apple crumbles, or cherry pies, because it's 100% cherry season at the moment, being summer our way. So you can do cherry pies, or any other type of pie that needs a bit of pastry, that doesn't, and you don't want to have any gluten, and you don't want to have any sugar or anything like that. Once, like I said, once you master this, you will be so happy. And it is quite, look at that now. Do you see how easy it is to work with now? I just spent that little bit of time feeling it out, and now I have a pastry that I can work with so easily. So we're going to make a couple more quickly. I'm going to do 6, but I think that this, from memory, this recipe will actually make you 12 of the mince pies. Here's my bulldozer, there it is. This will make you 12. So in fact, I think it will make you a few more. From memory, it actually makes 14. But because it's a 12 whole cupcake tin, that's why we go with 12. We go with the 12, or a baker's dozen, which is 13. So there you go. So that's how it goes in, just like that. Then we're going to have a bit of a look at what's happening over here, which is our gorgeous, okay, I know you're going to beep at me, shush, which is our, look, already we're getting a lot of good syrup happening there. You can sort of see it's kind of a little bit syrupy when I pick it up. And the flavors here, this is, once again, this is Christmas in a pot. This is Christmas in a pot. So normally I would actually let that sit on a very low heat for about 30 minutes. And it will just very slowly tick away. But because we're doing this live, I have sped up the process just a little bit. I'm going to put it back onto high, because all we're going to do now is take some more of that pastry, that wonderful pastry, and we're going to create the topping for our little fruit mince pies. So when it comes to the topping, this is when I absolutely 100% suggest that you create whatever you want from the topping, because this is your time to play and to take ownership of your pies. So for me personally, for some people, I know they like to actually have a complete cover, so it's an actually enclosed little mini pie. I like to see what's inside the pie when it comes to fruit mince. I like to see the lovely caramelized fruit and all the gorgeous bits of spices and the flavors from what you can see in there. So me personally, it needs a little bit more flour. You see, it's just kind of sticking to the bench. I'm just going to give it a little bit more flour, just a little bit. Me personally, I like to cut out shapes for my pastry top, and you can go crazy when it comes out to the type of shapes that you want to cut. Completely up to you. But if you have the ebook, you will have noticed that the shape I use is quite close to my heart. In fact, it's extremely close to my heart. And the shape that I use is literally a heart-shaped cutter. So you could use stars, you could use little mini Christmas trees, whatever's going to fit onto your tart. So we're going to cut out 6 hearts from our pastry. I'm going to let my bulldozer help me to just pick off the pastry that we don't need, working around the edges. So I'm just left with the hearts, which is really important. Just left with the hearts. Just picking off that pastry just around the edge. Oh, it was still a little bit wet, this one, but that's okay. We can make do. Cutting around the edge. Oh, I don't want to ruin that heart, so just doing that. So now I've got my hearts all ready to go on top of my tarts. My tarts there. You guys can see that? Yes, you can. You can see that. Over to our fruit mince. Look at that. Oh, ho, ho, ho. How fabulous is that looking? It's beginning to really... Shush! Shush, machine! Shush! Shh. It's really beginning to caramelize, which is what we want. So, we're going to fill our tarts. They only require a heaped tablespoon of the mixture. That's all you need in here. Don't have to overfill them. A heaped tablespoon is ideal. Of the mixture goes in. Just like that. Oh, I overfilled that one. I better make up by just kind of evening them out. Alright, that goes on. Cool. Over to our little hearts, and very carefully, you might even find that a knife helps you here, a sharp knife. Pull off your little shapes, and then they just sit on top of the mince. And I said you could just totally choose whatever shapes you want, whatever shapes you like. You put those shapes on. I like a little bit of heart because, you know, it's love. It's all love when it comes to our, oh, that heart's a bit wonky. It's alright. I mean, it's now not a heart, it's something else, but that's fine. Yeah, it's definitely all love when it comes to fruit mints and Christmas and cooking. So I just find hearts to be the perfect topper for anything that we are doing. The perfect topper. Okay, so we've got our hearts cut out. They are now topped on top of our little mince pies. Make some space. Clean up my bench a little bit. If you want to give a bit of a glaze, I'm going to go back to my almond milk or whatever non-dairy milk that you are using, and then just gently brush the top of the heart. Just a gentle brush, that's all it needs. A little bit goes in there, just like that. And then this is now going to go into the oven. I have the oven set, and normally I would have this full, right? Normally I'd have this full. We've only got 6 today because I just wanted to speed up the process for you guys. But normally this would be full of little tarts, and now they go in the oven, and they're going to cook in the oven. And it depends on your oven. Every oven's different. I've got mine set at 170 degrees Celsius, which is not that hot. It's kind of just under medium, and we're going to allow that to cook for between 10 to 15 minutes. I know there's a big range there, but I do find that all our ovens are different. My oven runs quite hot because I find that it cooks after about 11 to 12 minutes, but start with 10 minutes, and if you need to add more, add more. If you need to add less, you can't do that. That's why I always say start with 10 and keep a bit of an eye on them. So I'm gonna put that into the oven right now. They are ready to go. And if you want to join me in about 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to see what they look like when they come out of the oven. I didn't make any advance today, only because I was quite busy today. Didn't have enough time. So if you want to join me, please come back and join me. In about 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to go live again, and you're going to see the finished product, which is our fruit mince pie. So part 2 coming up in about 10 minutes. See you soon. Bye-bye.